No role plays, just real. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader.
We've never really, as a workforce, spent a lot of time on making sure we're developing good leaders.
We'll be able to share stories, experience, mistakes, failures, successes.
This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, on this episode, I want to listen to a really short clip of something that I heard from Gary Vaynerchuk, who's, I know, one of, we're big fans of his. And he said something that I heard it, and it's something that I would have said forever that I inherently agree with, but I don't think it's something that a lot of leaders talk about or actually believe or have an easy time doing. And it comes to motivating their teams. And so I want to play that clip real quick, and then I want to get your thoughts on it.
Cool.
You build culture by actually talking to people one by one and understanding what they care about. And what you will learn is some people want money, and some people want time with their family, and some people want title, and some people want creativity. And it is your job to know every single one of those things about every single person every single day. Because 23-year-old Sally at 27 wants different shit. 31-year-old Charlie at 34 wants different shit.
All right, so this is big for me because, you know, I've always believed that when it comes to motivating your team, that you need to meet people where they are. Of course, you know, you figure out what motivates them, what drives them. But and I can say this from personal experience, I have often had a hard time allowing whatever the answer is to those questions to not be placed in this kind of hierarchy of what's important, based on my own subjective opinion and my own life experience. And I see a lot of leaders doing the exact same thing. They, you know, it's the whole, it's the trope that you see online right now where someone applies for a job and in the first interview, they ask what the salary is. And the response is, we want someone who's motivated by more than money. And it's like, wait a minute, I need to pay the bills, right? And so how do you as a leader motivate people if you can't inherently allow them to be motivated by whatever motivates them, you know, as opposed to what you think they should be motivated by? What do you think about this?
Yeah, it's one of the hardest things, I think, as a leader. And it's something that over time I've had to work on myself and challenge myself even, is like this kind of projected idea of either what you've been taught by your leaders or your mentors, or what things have driven you to be successful in your role, you know, that's the way that things should be. And I would even admit to right now that there's still many of those things that I hold on to very, very dearly. And they're really hard to let go of, because in my experience, like most of the time, you know, high 90 percentile, they are successful, but not all of the time. And so I think it's just one of those things that it is really difficult. And I think your point around kind of, you know, making money and stuff like that and doing it for a paycheck, you know, you hear those terms thrown around so easily, like, you know, we don't want to just do this for a paycheck. And then I always have to be like, well, when I do, like, I do this for a paycheck because, you know, if I had $1 billion, I would probably be doing something else.
Right.
You know, like they're just being honest, right?
Right.
Like let's not make this silly. Like, it's okay if you are here and doing a good job for a paycheck, totally fine. As a matter of fact, we all are. But like let's not make this about whether or not needing money is a good or a bad thing, or that being intrinsically motivated to say, like, I am looking to continually build my compensation so I can live the life I want to live. And I also know that along with that typically comes promotions and more responsibility. But I think it's such an important thing to call out and to talk about, because it's a difficult thing for all leaders, myself included, to really make sure that we are very open, that we are listening, that we're not just projecting how we think the work has to be done, or what has to be done to drive success is what everybody has to do. It's a constant challenge, and I think it's ever evolving.
Yeah, I want to pick apart 2 elements of this specifically. One is that I've never worked for a leader who was independently wealthy, but who continued working for whatever that job was, being my leader and the leader of other people, because they just were so passionate about whatever that work was that they just had to be there every day. They had $1 billion in the bank, but they still wanted to be there. So let's not mince words here. There's no such thing as a person who is in that leadership role in all these environments where they would do it anyway for free. And so we're not talking about not having these things as motivation. We're just talking about where they fall on the hierarchy, right? That where they fall in line amongst many things that are important, because there are many things that are important when you look at what job you want to do. Now, would you take a job that you hated for 10% more money than the job that you loved? Most people would say no, unless it was the difference between paying the bills or not, right? So you wouldn't go from $100,000 a year to $110,000 a year, going from a job you absolutely loved to a job you hated. I don't know anybody who would say they would. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not important. It just means that it's one of many things. So when a leader is kind of making these subjective calls about we want someone who is motivated by more than money, or more than what Gary Vee says, more than title, what they're inherently saying is that they want people working for them who love the job, who love the business so much that they would do it even if they didn't get the money or the title. And to me, what I hear when I hear that is I hear a leader saying, I don't have any confidence in my own ability to deliver what you're looking for when it comes to money and or title. So therefore, I need to make sure that you're here because you love the business, because otherwise I think you're going to be here for a very short period of time and then you're going to leave. If I had the ability to control the thing that you are looking for, whether it's title or money or whatever it is, creativity, if I had control over how to impact that for you, then I'd be okay with whatever that motivation was, because now I feel like, okay, I'm in control of the situation now as the leader. That's what I hear when I hear a leader kind of making a judgment call on what is a good motivation versus what is a bad motivation. And what I'm saying is that, you said it's hard to let those things go. You don't have to let them go, because if they work for you, they should continue working for you, and you should be allowed to be motivated by whatever you're motivated by. But when it creeps into you thinking that some of your employees are inherently more righteous or more moral or have a better grasp on things because their priorities align with yours versus ones who don't, that's where it becomes a real problem, because you can end up either inadvertently or intentionally closing doors on employees who don't deserve to have doors closed on them.
Yeah, and I also want to highlight too, like there are definitely people that I know that absolutely love the work that they do, like and would do it for free. Seriously, like I think that there are people that would love to do what they do every day for free. Can they afford to do that? Different question. Right? Would they be willing to do it? Like if they could volunteer their time, it's like those are the people that I'm talking about. Like you might do this for your job, and then you also volunteer your time doing the same exact thing for somebody else. Right.
Sure.
And again, so like I don't want to also minimize people that have a real great passion for the work that they do. But to your point, what we're talking about is around the prioritization of those things and not being the person who, as the leader, is saying, here's what I believe your priority should be in this order. Like that's what we have to avoid. And those are the things. So, and again, because here, like I'll give you a for instance, right? There's many times in my career where I've seen somebody, met somebody where I'm like, man, they are phenomenal. Like they are really good at what they do. I see raw leadership talent. I see their ability to positively influence people. I see that they have a general optimism about them. People like to be around them. Like so much great here. And I want to talk to them about, have you considered your next step in your career or what you might want to do next?
Right.
And they're just kind of like, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, no, I'm fine. It's like, I'm fine just being here for 40 hours a week and then like doing my own thing.
That would blow some leaders' minds to hear that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But then I'm like, and this is where I have to fight myself. And I'm like, okay, but listen, it's the same 40 hours at the next job. Right. And it's the same 40 hours after that job. Right. So like, I'm like, why are you not prioritizing this? Because in my mind, it's the same 40 hours. So I'm not asking you to change anything about how many hours you work. I'm just saying, maybe this next job, maybe this next promotion opportunity you should consider or think about. But again, that's not for me to decide or to prioritize. It is absolutely, what I believe is for me to let somebody know how I feel about them.
Sure.
And to say like, Chris, I think you do amazing work. I think you could have a great career here. I think that you are ready for the next level of responsibility. And I think that, you do fantastic. And if you're thinking about 40 hours of work, this other job is also 40 hours, per week of work. But I'm not here to tell you have to do it. I just want you to know where I stand. And it is something that interests you at any point. Let me know,
Right.
because I would like to help support you in whatever you might need to gain the experience for the next job. But I know like a lot of times, and it was probably me in my early days, where I would be on you every week, and I would be like, hey, let's go grab some lunch. And I would give you an hour dissertation on why this career change is good for you, right? And just like try to constantly just reorder your priorities. And I don't think now, looking back on it, and as I've grown as a leader, yes, we have to push and prod and pull a little bit sometimes for people, but there is a point where we also have to be respectful of however people want to prioritize their life. And there may be things going on in your life that you may not be wanting to share right now, be willing to share right now. There may be things that are happening that I'm not aware of, where as I'm continually asking you about this, it may be causing some type of issue between us, and I'm not even aware of it because of my ignorance, because of my perseverance to continue to push and push and push.
Yeah, I think that's where it comes down to something you said a minute ago, which was, I think it's important as a leader, if you are pushing like that at the beginning, and it's okay to bring it up. You don't have to not say anything at all for fear that you're going to poke at a scab there. It's the pushing and pushing and pushing that could cause problems, right? So when you bring it up, as long as I think you're very clear on that, what you as the leader are motivated by in bringing this up is not that you think you could get more out of them in this different role versus this role. It's that you see a lot of talent out of them, and you know what doors could open for them if they choose to go that route. Whether or not they think that's a benefit to them, that's up to them to decide ultimately. But again, if you're using it from a standpoint of, I want to make sure this employee knows that I think they're talented. I think they have good work ethic. I like having them around. I like having them on this team. I'll tell you where it really shows, where you would really prove that what you're saying is true, is if what you were suggesting meant they left your team to go work for somebody else's team, right? Because that's when that's where the rubber really meets the road in terms of a leader putting the well-being of the employee ahead of themselves. And sometimes, even when it's a promotion on your own team, it's still for the right reasons, right? It's just harder to convince somebody of that necessarily. But the other part that I like that what he said is that he said that an employee at 21 wants different things than an employee at 24. And that I think is so important, because I think a lot of leaders in their best efforts, they do try to figure out what an employee wants. They do try to figure out how to motivate an employee and how to meet them where they are. And if you're working with an employee, let's say you're in a retail environment, and you're working with an employee who is 20 years old. Well, if they're going to college, what do they want? They want a flexible schedule. They want to be able to, at the last minute, find a way of getting out of a shift if a study group comes up they have to be a part of, or if a final's coming up that they didn't realize that they needed more studying for. They want to be able to pick up hours more easily if all of a sudden they decide that, it's getting towards holiday season and now I want to be able to buy gifts for people and I want more hours. There are certain things that person wants. Now, 3 years later, let's say they've graduated, and do they want the same things? No, they want different things. What are those things? It's your job to find out. It's your job to find out what they want. And the only way you'll do that is to have your thumb on the pulse of every single employee who reports directly to you, to know where they are in their lives and what things you can do to influence that. Now, of course, you can only influence based on what the employee is willing to share. But I have found that the more an employee truly believes that you as a leader are asking these questions because you're trying to open doors for them, the more likely they are willing to share. And the more they believe that the only reason you're asking is because you're trying to figure out how to wring more water out of the sponge before it dries up completely, the less they're willing to share, because they don't think you're in it for the right reasons. But again, this is constant work. And if you believe this is your job as a leader, then this is where you're spending the time. If you believe your job as a leader is to micromanage the process and to drive a scorecard or an Excel spreadsheet or whatever that is, it can feel daunting to do that and this both. And I think it really comes down to the priorities of what leaders decide is where they'll get the best bang for their buck in terms of the effort they spend.
Yeah. Now let me ask you a question. I know that you kind of spoke a little bit about the video and kind of the idea of, maybe from an age standpoint, and then you kind of gave some context, like a college kid versus somebody who's maybe out of college, right?
Yeah.
And I agree. Like, I think that there are there are differences in needs and wants as people just kind of have their journey of life,
Sure.
whatever that might be. Okay. When you work for a leader, though, that you feel has really done that quality level of work, where you feel like they have connected with you in such a way that you feel inspired by them, you feel trustworthy of them, you feel like they are down the right path for you. And again, let's take away the idea of time, because I think sometimes you get a lot of years working with somebody, you get a chance to really build that bond. But have there been either statements or questions or a decision that was made in the moment that cemented that for you, where you said, okay, this is a different kind of leader, or this is a different thing that happened where like now I'm very much invested, or now I have a different level of interest in investment in working for this leader because of this one thing that they did that really changed my perspective on what a supportive leader looks like?
Yes, absolutely. I worked with a leader who helped me go through interview preparation for a role that would have had me leave that person's team and go somewhere else in the same organization. But I would have had interaction with them still, but nothing from a business standpoint. We wouldn't be working on the same team. We wouldn't be responsible for the same outcomes. The work that I would be doing each day would not positively or negatively impact that leader's bonuses or salary or their daily performance. So, but they knew that it was a role where I could do more of what I loved every day versus what I was currently doing. And it was this moment where it was like, there was actually a part of me that considered not going through with the change, because the idea of working a job where I don't necessarily get to do everything that I love every day, but for a person who truly has my best interest at heart, that almost becomes a competing offering versus a job where I get to do more of what I love every day, but I don't know that leader. What if the next leader is just a pain in the butt? What if I really don't get along with that leader? What if they don't have my best interest at heart? Is doing the work that I love more so every day enough of a factor to counterbalance the leadership? And that's a question that every person has to be able to answer for themselves, but it's definitely something that went through my own mind when I went through this process, where I actually had to rethink, do I really want to leave this team? How much of what I love about my job is based on what I'm doing, and how much of what I love about my job is the people I work with and work for?
Yeah, that's awesome. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1 minute hack. But first, a few words from our sponsors.
The 1 minute hack.
All right, for this episode's 1 minute hack, here's what I want you to do. Get out your pen and paper and write down every person who reports directly to you. And then next to their name, I want you to write down what you believe their intrinsic motivation is for whatever the next thing is. If they want to get promoted, if they want more money, if they're, in school, whatever you believe that motivation is. And if you don't know what it is, then honestly, shame on you, go find out, right? But if you do know what it is and you write them down, if you find yourself placing a hierarchy on some of those motivations that are kind of more valuable to you than others, if you find yourself kind of making internal subjective judgments on who you think is more, kind of deserving of your help or your support than others, I want you to go to the people who you think are at the lower end of that spectrum, and I want you to be curious about why those motivations are what they are. So to give an example, let's say a person is motivated by title. They want to get promoted, and everything they talk about is all about, how do I get to be the manager of this or the supervisor of that? They want that title. Go sit down with them, and maybe you'll find out that in their family life and their home culture, that title meant everything to their parents growing up, and now they're trying to please their parents, and they don't necessarily want it for themselves, but they want it from somebody else. That could be a jumping off point in terms of a relationship builder between the two of you on what really is motivating them or driving them. Maybe they want more money, and you think that's not as a valid a response to you in terms of what motivates them, but you find out the reason they want more money is because they have aging family members who are about to lose their house because they can't afford to live there anymore, and they're really trying to help out that family. It's not just for what you think are selfish reasons. So there's more behind all of these reasons, and it's your job as a leader to not just stop at the surface level, to dig deeper and find out how you can meet people where they are, because I promise you we have more in common than what divides us, and you'll find some commonalities with your people, even if you think on the surface you don't have any.
Yeah, I think it's a great 1 minute hack, and just a reminder, I think just the importance of being curious and continuing to not again, project our own thoughts or perspectives. There's a lot of things that you need in leadership, and confidence is definitely one of them. And sometimes that can bleed into the ego space, and guilty as charged. It happens to me. It happens to a lot of us. But I think that being curious and listening and genuinely trying to just help and understand people, when you start to get into some of those conversations, to your point, it builds a different level of relationship. And I think it helps to align both leaders and their people on the common goals and the things they want to accomplish and how you can best help them get there. So I think it's a great hack.
Yeah, I think the key to a lot of this when it comes to leadership is finding ways of connecting with your people. And this is one of those situations where if your goal is to create the connections, anything that causes you to say, oh, this person shouldn't get this connection, this person shouldn't get this time with me or this support, you're cutting it off before it has the ability to start. So go into everything with an open mind, because your goal as the leader is to make these personal connections, regardless of how it might seem you and your people might diverge from the same path, because that's how you're likely to get the best productivity out of them. That's how you're likely to get the best work out of them when they are working for you, and they're likely to think more highly of you when the day comes they move on.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.